Hello friends, continuing with English literature for competitive purposes. So, as discussed last time, we ended on a note of the beginning of the Elizabethan age, and I am sure you have watched that very interesting video on the Elizabethan period and about the Queen Elizabeth I. So, this is what we will more or less talk about the Elizabethan period, and then of course some major events that happened post Elizabethan period, that is the Jacobean period or the reign of King James I, extremely important. So, look at the board here, look at the topics written. We will be looking at certain historical and literary landmarks. I keep on insisting on understanding the socio-political cultural history of England as well as America, without which understanding the kind of literature that was produced during that age would be very boring and also not very satisfying. So, this is what you have to keep revising and updating yourself with English history. Later on, when we do American and Asian literature, then we have to understand those kinds of the social and the political and cultural background, the milieu as they say of that age also. So, history and literary landmarks. So, literature of course Shakespeare is at the center. University wits, Ben Jonson, Philip Sidney and also other major writers of the period, of course, but no one surpasses Shakespeare. So, that remains. So, he is the most important literary figure of that period or any other period. Now, and the major landmarks, historical and political, accession of the first Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, the events that took place during her reign, the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, that is very important, the rise and fall of Walter Raleigh. Also, after her very long era got over, then some events that took place during the reign of King James I. So, the gunpowder plot. Here are two important names, Guy Fawkes and Sir Thomas Knivett, and the Mayflower voyage. So, these are the events that took place during the reign of King James I. So, this is what we are going to look at today, and I would suggest that as I always keep telling you, we are just introducing the course. It is just a very short 8 weeks course. You have to do a lot of reading on your own, on yourself. Okay. So, please do not take these lectures as the complete basis on which you can balance your quest for acing exams, but this could be an excellent resource for you. That is what I keep telling you all the time, and that is what I want to tell you today as well. So, as always, let us start with doing some exercises that may be of use to you. Please look at the slide here. Prominent members of this group were Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, Thomas Nash, John Lyly, Thomas Lodge and George Peele. Which is the missing name? What are we talking about, and which is the missing name with this particular group? Here are your choices. Who is missing? A. William Shakespeare, B. Thomas Kyd, C. Bishop Latimer, D. Thomas More. Next, read the following extract. What I want of Dulcinea del Toboso, she is as good as the greatest princess in the land. For not all those poets who praise ladies under names which they choose so freely really have such mistresses. I am quite satisfied to imagine and believe that the good Aldonza Lorenzo is so lovely and virtuous. And choose the correct response. Identify the work. Don Quixote. As You Like It, Midsummer's Night's Dream to his coy mistress. Next slide. Please read the following. Fortune that favors fools these 2 short hours, we wish away both for your sakes and ours, judging spectators and desire in place, to the author justice, to ourselves but grace. Our scene is London, cause we would make known no country's mirth is better than our own, no clime breeds better matter for your whore, board, square, impostor, many persons more, whose manners now called humours feed the stage, and which have still been subject for the rage or spleen of comic writers, though this pen did never aim to grieve, but better men, however, the age he lives in doth endure the vices that she breeds above their cure. But when the wholesome remedies are sweet, and in their working gain and profit meet, he hopes to find no spirit so much diseased, but will with such fair correctives be pleased. For here he doth not fear who can apply, if there be any that will sit so nigh unto the stream, to look what it doth run, they shall find things they think or wish were done. They are so natural follies, but so shin as in shown, as ever the doers may see and yet not own. Please go through this extract carefully. Take a moment. And here are your questions. Identify the work. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, Ben Jonson's The Alchemist, Philip Sidney's Arcadia. Remember, these are the major literary stars of that period. Question 4. Read the following extract. Doros to Pamela. My sheep are thoughts which I both guide and serve. Their pasture is fair hills of fruitless love. On barren sweets they feed, and feeding starve. I wail their lot, but will not other prove. My sheep hook is one hope, which all upholds. My wheat's desire cut out in endless folds. What wool my sheep shall wear whilst thou they live. In you it is, you must the judgment give. See all the elements of the so-called pastoral. If you have done something like pastoral, even without knowing the title of the poem, you should know, or even without knowing the poet, the name of the poet, you would know what is being talked about, which work is being discussed. Sheep, feed, barren sweets, sheep hook, what wool. So look at this. So what kind, the genre or the subgenre it is a pastoral, and who could be the poet of pastoral poetry? Identify the poem. Troilus and Cressida, that is Chaucer, the Fairy Queen, that is Spenser, Eclogues, that is Virgil, Arcadia, that is Philip Sidney. Number 5. What is the inscription on Ben Jonson's tombstone? A. The good Ben Jonson. B. The honest Ben Jonson. C. The rare Ben Jonson. D. The exceptional Ben Jonson. Next question, number 6. Read the following extract from Shakespeare's play, As You Like It. As I remember Adam, it was upon this fashion, bequeathed me by will, but poor 1,000 crowns. And as thou sayest, charged my brother on his blessing to breed me well. And there begins my sadness. My brother Jacques, he keeps at school, and report speaks goldenly of his profit. For my part, he keeps me rustically at home, or to speak more properly, stays me here at home unkempt. For call you that keeping for a gentleman of my birth, that differs not from the stalling of an ox. His horses are bred better For besides that they are fair with their feeding, they are taught their manage, and to that end riders dearly hired. But I, his brother, gain nothing under him but growth, for the which his animals on his dunghills are as much bound to him as I. Who is the speaker here? Oliver, Duke Frederick, Touchstone, Orlando. Whose epitaph is this? Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust and closed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Extremely famous, historic, epic lines. Epitaph on a tombstone of a major personality. A. William Shakespeare. B. Henry VIII. C. Christopher Marlowe. D. Thomas Kyd. Next, read the following. A man that apprehends death no more dreadfully but as a drunken sleep, careless, reckless, and fearless of what is past, present, or to come, insensible of mortality and desperately mortal. Your question is, identify the speaker. Jacques in As You Like It, Cassius in Othello, Banquo in Macbeth, Bernardine in Measure for Measure. Next question, identify the play. All quotes are from the same play. A. The bright day is done and we are for the dark. These are extremely famous and popular lines, even used here and there in different contexts. B. There is beggary in the love that can be reckoned. C. The bar she sat in, like a burnished throne, burnt on the water, the poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. For her own person, it beggared all description. Again, very popular lines. Which play? Here are your choices. A. Antony and Cleopatra. B. Julius Caesar. C. Hamlet. D. Troilus and Cressida. Number 10. Read the following lines by Shakespeare. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it that, surfeiting the appetite, may sicken and so die, that to strain again it had a dying fall. Oh, it came over my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough no more, it's not so sweet now as it was before. Which play is this? If music be the food of love, play on. Immortal lines, oft quoted, and so oft quoted that now they have almost become a cliche. Choices are, identify the play. Choices are A. Romeo and Juliet, B. Antony and Cleopatra, C. Twelfth Night, D. As You Like It. Number 11. I am just giving you the plot, the beginning of the plot of a famous play by Shakespeare. What happens here? Helena, the orphan daughter of a famous physician, is the ward of the Countess of Rosello and deeply in love with her son Count Bertram, who has been sent to the court of the King of France. I am just telling the story. Despite her beauty and virtues, Helena has no hope of attracting Bertram, since she is of low birth and he is a noble man. However, when word comes that the king is ill, she goes to Paris and, using her father's arts, cures the illness. In return, she is given the hand of any man in the realm. She chooses Bertram. Her new husband is appalled at the match, however, and shortly after their marriage flees France without consummating the marriage. Which play are we talking about? A Shakespearean play. Look at the names, even if you haven't read the play. Where do you find these characters? Which Shakespearean play has these characters? So, their choices are A. All is well that ends well, B. As You Like It, C. Two Gentlemen of Verona, D. Comedy of Errors. Number 12. In which play does the character of the Spanish braggart appear? A. Much Ado About Nothing. B. The Taming of the Shrew. C. Comedy of Errors. D. Love's Labour Lost. Number 13. Where are the following plays set? So, we are looking at the space, the geographic location of these plays. Hamlet, Coriolanus, Measure for Measure, Comedy of Errors. Your choices are Epicurus, Syracuse, Vienna, Rome, Elsinore, Denmark. So, where are these plays set? Answer the following. In which of the following plays does the character of Antonio does not exist? A. The Taming of the Shrew. B. The Merchant of Venice. C. The Tempest. D. Much Ado About Nothing. Alright, so let us discuss the answers now. First one, we are talking about the university wits. Answer is D. Thomas Kyd. So, these people are collectively known as the university wits. Answer is D. You should know what was university wits. It was a group of English dramatists who wrote during the last 15 years of the 16th century. Okay, so during the Elizabethan period, and who transformed the native interlude and chronicle plays. See, you should know what are native plays. Very soon we will be touching upon that also when we do some literary terms, literary genres, but you are supposed to know what were native. Interludes and chronicles, mystery moralities, that is what was happening in England during the Middle Ages. And these plays, these playwrights, educated at Cambridge and Oxford University, they brought or they infused in the English drama with newer themes, plot, characters, language. They are, in other words, the pioneers of theatre in England, known for bringing about a degree of diversity and quality in the English dramatic or theatre scenario. So, the name that is missing there is Thomas Kyd. Number 2, that Dulcinea, that is from Don Quixote by Cervantes. Miguel de Cervantes, the great writer from Spain, 1547 to 1616. That means he died in the same year as Shakespeare. Apart from being a novelist, he was also a playwright and poet, and of course, the seminal work is Don Quixote, written in 1605 and also in 1615. He took almost 10 years to complete, and it is also the most important and most celebrated work from Spain and in Spanish literature. You should also know that Cervantes also tried his hand to the writing of drama at this age, the early dawn of the so-called the early dawn of the golden age of the Spanish theatre. He was commissioned or contracted to write 2 plays in 1585, and there was a play called Confusion, La Confusa, and he later described it as the best play he ever wrote. The 2 surviving plays of this time are one is a historical tragedy called La Numancia, okay, a tragedy, and another one is El Trato de Argel, that is the traffic of Algiers. They were written in 1580s, somewhere during the dates are always uncertain, but the possible date is during the 1580s. Third one is C. It is The Alchemist, Ben Jonson's The Alchemist. As we have been referring to Ben Jonson here now and then, he was the son of a clergyman, okay, and he received very good education at Westminster School. When James the First ascended the throne in 1603, Johnson soon became a royal favorite. He was often asked to write mass, which was a particular kind of drama which called for magnificent scenery, pageantry, spectacle, clothes, beautiful costumes, giving nobility the opportunity of acting the part of some distinguished or supernatural characters, as we have already seen in the Fairy Queen. Ben Jonson was awarded a royal pension by James I in 1617 and also became the first poet laureate, though the title was not given, but he was pensioned. So, unofficially at least, and not in name, but still he was the first poet laureate. He also wrote a volume of prose called Discoveries Made Upon Men and Matter, which contains his famous criticism on Shakespeare, and it is very noteworthy because it shows how Shakespeare's contemporary regarded him. He says of Shakespeare, I love the man and do honor his memory on this side idolatry as much as any. It is like idolizing someone, worshipping someone. So, that is how Shakespeare was regarded by a contemporary no less great than Ben Jonson. An interesting trivia about Ben Jonson is that he was buried standing up in the Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. And why was this done? Because he expressed such a wish in jest, in humor, but James I took him seriously. The poem, the pastoral poem, answer is D. Question 4, answer D, Philip Sidney's Arcadia. A pastoral poem, a great poem for all ages. Philip Sidney was an Elizabethan courtier, statesman, soldier, poet and patron of scholars and poets, a complete Renaissance man. After Shakespeare's sonnets, Sidney's Astrophel and Stella is considered the finest Elizabethan sonnet cycle, one of the greatest pieces of sonnets, next only to Shakespearean sonnets. He also wrote The Defense of Poesy, which introduced the critical idea. So, he was also a literary critic for those times. So, in The Defense of Poesy, he introduces the critical ideas of Renaissance theorists to England. Renaissance theorists from across the world. So, a true scholar and a gentleman and a poet and many other things as well. His aunt, the Countess of Huntingdon, had brought to her court Countess's ward, Penelope Devereux, that was 1581, and later that year Penelope married the young Lord Rich. Now, Sidney, it is rumored that he had tried to court Penelope, who ended up marrying someone named Lord Rich. Now, this is not very certain, as all things. Okay, we cannot abide by the historical certainty or fact. We cannot state with utmost certainty whether he did fall desperately in love with Penelope, who married someone else. But during the summer of 1582, he composed a sonnet sequence, Astrophel and Stella, that recounts a courtier's passion in fictionalized terms. So, though there is no, we cannot account for any accuracy, still many people say that Sidney was in love with Penelope and the sonnet was for her, and this started the trend of courtly love. Okay. So, love's first stirrings, his struggles against it, abandonment of his suit to give himself instead to the greater cause of public service. So, all these things are the subject matter of Astrophel and Stella, one of the sonnets there. Now, these sonnets witty, impassioned. Again, they were also responsible for bringing Elizabethan poetry of age. And also not to forget the great defense of poesy, which is a very eloquent plea for the social value of imaginative fiction, okay, one of the finest works of literary criticism. Number 5, so epitaph on Ben Jonson's tomb. Answer is C, the rare Ben Jonson. Not the good or honest or extraordinary, the rare Ben Jonson. Answer to question C is D, Orlando. The speaker is Orlando. And on whose epitaph the lines about not removing his bones, that is, answer is A, William Shakespeare. Famous lines. Answer 8, question 8, answer to question 8 is D, Bernardine in Measure for Measure. And the quotes, the famous quotes that I about, she sat in barge and the best days are over, the dark days are here, from Antony and Cleopatra. If music be the food of love, play on. Number 10, answer is C, 12th Night. Answer to 11 is A, All is Well that Ends Well, Helena and Bertram. And the character of the Spanish braggart is in Love's Labour Lost, D. And the answer to the 13th question, so first is Hamlet, set in Elsinore, Denmark, Coriolanus in Rome, Measure for Measure in Vienna, and Comedy of Errors, Epidaurus Syracuse, that is Greece. In which play we do not find the character of Antonio is A, The Taming of the Shrew. There is no character named Antonio there, otherwise the name Antonio appears in 5 Shakespearean plays. So, we have been talking about the great historical landmarks. Now, of course, Elizabethan period, so the major landmark was of course accession of Elizabeth I. Elizabeth Tudor was born on 7 September 1533 at Greenwich Palace. England has several beautiful palaces. Okay. She was born in one of the most beautiful places, the Greenwich Palace. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. We have already discussed how Henry VIII almost fought the church so that he could marry Anne Boleyn and divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. He already had a daughter, Mary, through that marriage, and Mary was the princess, the only princess. However, because Henry wanted his marriage to Catherine nullified, he used the excuse that the marriage itself was illegal, because Catherine was the widow of his brother who died, King Arthur, and I mean before he was coronated. So, Arthur died, and therefore, Henry VIII married his brother's widow, and therefore, he called it almost like an incest and declared his, of course, it was an excuse to divorce Catherine, who was extremely adamant. She wanted the title of the queen, she wanted the title of the princess for her daughter Mary, but Henry VIII in his willfulness and stubbornness would not yield. Now, so he had defied the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor also to marry Anne, He wanted, one reason was that he was passionately in love with Anne Boleyn, and also he needed a legitimate male heir. He already had an illegitimate son, Edward, but because of the legal question, Edward couldn't be his heir to the throne. Elizabeth's birth was one of the most exciting political events in the 16th century European history. However, Anne soon fell out of favor with the king, and Henry VIII ordered Anne to be arrested and charged her with a variety of crimes, some of which were including practicing heresy and witchcraft and having incestuous relationship with her own brother George. Now, Anne was executed in the Tower of London. Ironically, that was the place where she was placed, before her marriage to Henry VIII, and she was executed in 1536 in the same Tower of London. Henry VIII was not too fond of Elizabeth, the little Elizabeth. He yearned for a male heir, and soon after Anne's death, Anne's execution, he married Jane Seymour. Now, Elizabeth was now in the same position as her half-sister, Princess Mary. However, she was bright and very serious from the beginning, and she was well versed in classical subjects as rhetoric and literature and language and philosophy, history and theology. Unlike her half-sister Mary, Elizabeth, along with Edward, both of these children, they were raised Protestants. She studied theology and supported the Protestant cause. And also, one reason was that only Protestants recognized her parents' marriage, not the Catholics. She proved to be one of the greatest rulers England ever had. She ruled alone for nearly half a century. She never married. She was also known popularly as the Virgin Queen, and she has lent her name to a glorious epoch in the world history. It's to her credit that England enjoyed peace, prosperity and stability for such a long time. In her speech to Parliament, one of her greatest speeches, she told her people, "I count the glory of my crown that I have reigned with your love." She was truly her people's queen. She reigned for a very long time, 1533 to 1603. Many of some of the greatest pieces or works of literature occurred or took place or were written, were composed during her reign. One of her favorites was a courtier called Walter Raleigh, Sir Walter Raleigh, English adventurer, writer and a favorite courtier of Queen Elizabeth I. During Elizabeth's reign, Raleigh organized 3 major expeditions to America, including the first English settlement in America in 1587. It was called the Roanoke settlement, located where what we call today as North Carolina, the present day Carolina. So, Walter Raleigh is credited with the first English settlement in America. Raleigh later fell out of favor with Elizabeth after she learned of his secret marriage to someone called Bessie Throckmorton, one of her maids of honor, and he was imprisoned for a while with his wife in the Tower of London on some trumped up charges. Now, he had to buy his freedom, and then Raleigh married Bessie, distanced himself from the whimsical queen. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, Raleigh was implicated as an enemy of King James I and imprisoned with he was imprisoned with a death sentence. Later, the sentence was revoked, and in 1616, Raleigh was freed to lead an expedition to America, to the so called New World, this time to establish a gold mine in South America. However, the expedition was a failure, and when Raleigh returned to England, the death sentence was revived, and this time he was executed. There was another important event of this period, that is called the Gunpowder Plot. The Gunpowder Plot was a failed attempt to blow up King James I, who ruled from 1566 to 1625. And the idea was to blow up the parliament also on November 5, 1605. The plot was organized by someone, the mastermind was someone called Robert Catesby, who in an effort to end the persecution of Roman Catholics by the English rulers and the English government, he was the one who hatched this or devised this plot. Now, Catesby and others hoped to replace the country's Protestant government with Catholic leadership. So, on 5th November at about midnight, there was someone called Sir Thomas Knivett, a justice of the peace. He found Guy Fawkes lurking in a cellar under the Parliament building and ordered the premises searched. Guy Fawkes was one of the members of Robert Catesby's team. Now, 36 barrels of gunpowder were discovered, and Fawkes was taken into custody. He was tortured, and then he came out. He revealed that he was a participant in an English Catholic conspiracy to execute England's Protestant government and replace it with Catholic leadership. The Gunpowder Plot. Also, remember the man Robert Catesby, an English Catholic, and his father had been persecuted by Queen Elizabeth I for refusing to conform to the Church of England. Guy Fawkes had also converted to Catholicism and became a religious zealot. He also fought in the army of Catholic Spain under the Protestant Catesby. They all rented a cellar that extended under the House of Lords building. Fawkes planted the gunpowder there, and after the gunpowder was found, there was a trial. The English authorities killed or captured almost all the plotters and put the survivors on trial. They were executed for treason. So, moments before the start of this execution on January 31st, 1606, Parliament established November 5th November as a day of public thanksgiving. Those of you who are familiar with the film V for Vendetta would know the significance of November 5th. It is the day to cause anarchy and bring about chaos in the establishment. So, 5th November, Guy Fawkes Day. So, 5th November is celebrated as Guy Fawkes Day by burning Fawkes' effigy. Another major event of this period was the defeat of the Spanish Armada. We were talking about Shakespeare's Love's Labour Laws, and which talks about the Spanish Armada. The history is that in 1585 England was at war with Spain, and Sir Francis Drake of England took a fleet to the Spanish Main, where he sank a large number of Spanish ships and plundered several of their rich cities. 2 years later, he sailed into the Bay of Cadiz and sank a number of ships that were assembled there. He called this enterprise singeing the King of Spain's beard, setting the king's beard on fire, figuratively. Now, there was someone called the Duke of Parma. The King of Spain was King Philip, and the Duke of Parma was his governor in the Netherlands. He was very concerned about this war, this battle between Spain and England, and there were talks about of mounting an attack on England before he had regained a large enough port on the Dutch coast. Now, Philip overruled his doubts by deciding that a fleet from Spain would secure a landing area on the Kentish coast and then ferry Parma's army across. In 1586, Drake was at Plymouth when he got the news that a great Spanish fleet had been sighted in the Channel, the English Channel, known as Spain's invincible armada, something that cannot be defeated. It had lumbering ships, but they were soon chased off by the lighter and more active ships of the English fleet. The Spanish fleet was completely demolished. And what was the result of this? Queen Elizabeth was she became a decisive and a major player in the political scene or political arena of that period. England became a world-class power and was credited with introducing effective long-range weapons into naval warfare for the first time, thus ending the era of close quarter fighting. So, that was one major event in the history of England during the reign of Elizabeth I. Before winding up today's class, I also want to introduce you to another historic event, that is the sailing, the voyage of the Mayflower. That was 1620, and a merchant ship called the Mayflower set sail from Plymouth, that was a port on the southern coast of England. Now, the Mayflower's cargo typically was wine and dry goods, but on this trip the ship carried passengers, 102 of them, all hoping to start a new life on the other side of the Atlantic. Nearly 40 of these passengers were Protestant separatists. They called themselves saints who hoped to establish a new church in the new world, America. Today, we refer to the colonists who crossed the Atlantic on the Mayflower as pilgrims, the Pilgrim Fathers, the first batch of people from England to arrive on the American land. And on this note, I would like to end today's class. Before we wind up, take a look at this video. Sir Philip Sidney, a brief biography, and the link is given here. Thank you very much.